All right, so you've probably seen the headlines, right? It feels like every other day there's a new article or video popping up talking about the end of the US dollar's reign. There's this constant buzz, this feeling that the very foundations of the global financial system are starting to shake. So in this explainer, we are going to dig in and find out what is really going on.
And this is the big question, isn't it? It's on everybody's mind. And it got a huge boost recently with all these rumors flying around, like the one saying Saudi Arabia just ended its 50-year-old petrodollar deal with the US. Now, while that specific agreement did expire, the two countries are definitely still working together on security and energy. But that rumor really points to a much bigger, much deeper truth about how the world is changing.
So to really get to the bottom of this, we're going to treat it like a detective case. Seriously, we're going to follow the evidence, piece together the clues, and see if we can solve the mystery of the dollar's future. Our investigation starts with, well, the most obvious suspect. Okay, so clue number 1, the economic puzzle. Logically, right, the first place you'd look to figure out how powerful a currency is the size of the economy behind it. I mean, it makes sense. A bigger economy means more trade, more investment, and of course, more people needing that currency. And that leads us to a pretty massive number. 17%. That's about how much of the entire world's economy, its nominal GDP, comes from China. Now, just to put that into perspective for you, that is more than the entire Eurozone combined. We're talking about an absolute economic giant, a manufacturing powerhouse that has completely reshaped the global economy over the past few decades. And this image right here just drives that point home. For years and years, the sheer amount of stuff traded between the US and China has been absolutely staggering. It's created this incredibly complex web where both countries really depend on each other. So you would naturally assume that an economy this huge would have a currency with an equally huge role on the world stage. But that's where our puzzle really begins. Okay, now this is where things get really interesting, because this chart shows a major disconnect. Take a look at what the world's central banks, the big government banks, actually keep in their vaults. These are the currencies they use to buy stuff from other countries and manage their own money. And look at this. The US dollar makes up almost 60% of all of it. The euro is a super distant second. And China's currency, the renminbi, it's less than 3%. Tiny. So what gives? We've got this massive mismatch. China's economy is a giant, but its currency is barely a blip on the global reserve radar. It seems like economics alone just can't explain why the dollar is still so dominant. And that tells us, as detectives, that we need to look for a different, maybe more powerful clue, a hidden driver that the raw economic numbers just don't show us. And this brings us to clue number 2, the hidden driver. This is where our investigation takes a really interesting turn, because we're stepping into the world where money and power collide. It turns out, when you're talking about global superpowers, the normal rules of economics often get rewritten by the rules of geopolitics. A country's economic muscle isn't enough. It also needs the political and military power to back it all. One of the research papers we're looking at puts it in this really stark way. It says, "There is no place on Earth where tigers and lions live together because they are predators of the same level." It's a powerful way of saying that when two global powers rise to the same level, conflict isn't just a possibility, it's almost a law of nature. And this rivalry has a direct, and I mean direct, impact on which currency the rest of the world decides to trust. And boom, here is the core finding. This is the smoking gun of our investigation. Researchers dug into the data and found that while a country's economic size is a pretty good way to predict its currency's global status, its military spending is an even stronger predictor. It seems military power isn't just for fighting wars. It's a critical foundation for financial trust and stability on the world stage. A country with a powerful military is just seen as a safer bet, a more credible guarantor of the whole system. And listen, this isn't just some academic theory. We can see the evidence playing out right in front of our eyes. This chart shows how much US government debt China has been holding over the last decade. As the friction between the two countries has grown, you can see this clear, steady downward trend. This is a deliberate strategy. A geopolitical rival is not going to help fund its competitor by buying up its debt. It's as simple as that. Okay, so we've got the motive, right? Rising geopolitical tension. So what are the means? What's the getaway plan? How are countries actually building an escape route from a dollar-based system they don't totally trust anymore? Well, the answer lies in new financial tech and new infrastructure. And that brings us to our third and final clue. Now, the thing that really put this search for an alternative into overdrive was the weaponization of the financial system. We're talking about things like freezing or seizing the assets of other countries, most notably what happened with Russia's central bank reserves. For many countries around the world, that move was a massive shock to the system. It basically destroyed confidence and made a lot of leaders ask themselves, wait a minute, are our assets safe? And that fear has led to the rapid development of a whole new parallel system. So on the left, you've got SWIFT. That's been the main way banks talk to each other across borders for decades, but it's heavily influenced by the US. On the right, you've got something new, like Project mBridge. This thing is designed specifically to be an alternative. It's a peer-to-peer network built by central banks in places like China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the UAE. It's faster, cheaper, and, this is the crucial part, it's designed to be independent of that old system. So what's the magic ingredient making these new financial highways possible? It's something called a central bank digital currency, or a CBDC. The easiest way to think about it is just as a digital version of a dollar or a yuan, but it's issued directly by the central bank itself. This is the tech that lets platforms like mBridge move money across borders in seconds, instead of taking days like the old system. And what we're starting to see is the emergence of these distinct currency blocks, sort of like different financial neighborhoods popping up. This isn't one system totally replacing another. Instead, new, separate ecosystems are forming. What you're looking at here are visualizations that show how these networks are growing around currencies like the Chinese yuan and the Russian ruble. It shows that countries are more and more choosing to trade with each other using their own currencies, instead of always defaulting to the dollar. It's a huge shift. All right, so let's recap our case file. We've gathered our clues, we've got the economic puzzle, the hidden driver of military power, and the high-tech getaway plan. Now it's time to put it all together and deliver the verdict on the future of the dollar. So here's the bottom line. The evidence does not point to some dramatic overnight collapse of the dollar. Not at all. What we are witnessing is a slow, very deliberate and calculated shift. The world is moving away from a unipolar system where one currency calls all the shots to a multipolar one, where several different currencies and systems can exist side by side. Now, this is where it gets really wild. Some models are actually trying to predict when this new balance might happen. This chart is a projection, and it's based on that historical link between a country's economic and military power and its currency's global role. And it suggests that the renminbi's role could reach a new equilibrium, one that actually matches China's power, sometime around the year 2042. Now, of course, this is just a projection, a lot could change, but it's a helpful way to think about this as a long-term transition, not some overnight event. So let's just quickly run through the key takeaways from our investigation. First, geopolitics and military power are actually better predictors of a currency status than just economics alone. Second, using the dollar system as a weapon has backfired a bit, destroying trust and speeding up the search for alternatives. Third, new tech is making those alternatives a real possibility. And finally, the endgame here isn't the death of the dollar, but the birth of a more complex, multipolar financial world. And that leaves us with one final massive question to think about. The era of the dollar being the undisputed king shaped the last 75 years of history. As that era slowly gives way to a world with multiple centers of financial gravity, we have to ask ourselves, what does financial power even look like in this new world? What are the new rules of the game? That, my friends, is something we are all going to be discovering together.
Wow, that was something, right? But don't go anywhere, there's more coming, and it's gonna make you think in a whole new way. Quick reminder, if you like learning cool stuff without the fluff, subscribe now. You won't regret it.
For years, AI felt like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? Just a headline about some far-off future. Well, that future is officially here. We have crossed a threshold, and 2025 is the year AI stops being a what if and starts being a what now. It's already in the tools we use every day, it's already starting to reshape our jobs, and believe me, it is sending massive shockwaves through the economy that will affect all of our finances. So let's pull back the curtain and break down what's really going on. So where do we even begin with all this? I think the only place to start is with the speed. The sheer mind-bending speed of it all. See, AI isn't just getting a little bit better each year, it's accelerating. The models are getting smarter, the hardware is getting smaller and more efficient, and what it can do is just exploding at a pace that is genuinely hard to keep up with. And you don't have to take my word for it. The numbers tell the whole story. Okay, take a look at this number. 97.9%. Now, this isn't a score on your high school math test. No. This is an AI's performance on a set of math problems so incredibly difficult, they're used for elite international competitions. For the absolute best human minds on the planet. For the longest time, this was one area where we still had a clear edge. The human baseline was about 90%. Well, that advantage is officially gone.
But hold on, before we start thinking the machines have taken over completely, let's look at this number, 8.8%. That's a little different, huh? This is the best score AI could get on a brand new test, one designed to measure uniquely human skills, things like abstract reasoning and creative problem solving. So what this tells us is that while AI is becoming this unbelievable calculator, there's still a massive, massive gap when it comes to real, genuine understanding. Now, this slide shows one of the most important things happening in AI that almost nobody is talking about. We used to think that for an AI to get smarter, it had to get bigger and bigger. Well, that's changing, and it's changing fast. Just a couple of years ago, you needed a monster 540 billion parameter model to get top-tier performance. Today, a model that's 142 times smaller can do the exact same thing. This is a huge deal because it means this incredible technology is no longer just for giant tech companies. It's getting efficient enough to run right on our own phones and laptop. And this new intelligence isn't just about text and numbers anymore. AI is really starting to see. I mean, it can look at a picture like this and do way more than just label objects. It actually understands the story in the picture. It can reason that, hey, these people are holding instruments, there's a case on the ground, one of them probably just earned some money playing music. When you combine that kind of visual smarts with the unbelievable video we're now seeing from AI, you realize it's starting to understand and even create our entire visual world. Okay, so the tech is moving at light speed, we get that. But what happens when that speed slams into the real world, into our jobs, our economy? Well, that brings us to our second theme, the economic shockwave. And this is where it gets really real for all of us, because it's creating this fundamental tension between this amazing promise of productivity and a very, very real fear of displacing people. And please, don't think this is some hypothetical what if. This quote is about a real CEO at a company called Ignite Tech. He was so convinced that AI was the future that he literally rebuilt his entire company around it. And in the process, he replaced nearly 80% of his staff. Just let that sink in. This is what this disruption actually looks like on the ground.
So with all this disruption, you have to ask, what's the potential upside? I mean, there's got to be one, right? Well, according to Goldman Sachs, it is enormous. They're projecting that if we adopt AI widely, it could boost the entire global GDP by 7% over the next decade. That might not sound like a huge number, but we're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars in new wealth.
But here's the other side of that exact same forecast. The potential price tag for that boom in productivity, 300 million. That's the number of full-time jobs that could be automated or displaced around the world. It is an absolutely staggering trade-off, and it's one we can't afford to ignore.
And if you're sitting there thinking, okay, that's a big number, but it's probably still a few years away. Well, the data tells a very different story. Right now, today, across all the major economies in the world, nearly 3/4 of all organizations are already using generative AI. This isn't a future forecast anymore. This is our present reality. The train has very much left the station. So this economic shockwave is real. But here's the thing. It isn't hitting everyone equally. Not even close. In fact, it's creating what we can call the Great AI Divide, and it's threatening to split the world into a whole new kind of haves and have-nots. Now, to really understand this divide, the World Bank has a super helpful way of thinking about it. They call it the 4 Cs. Basically, for any country to succeed in the age of AI, it needs 4 key things. It needs connectivity, the internet and infrastructure. It needs compute, the raw processing horsepower. It needs context, the right kind of data. And finally, it needs competency, skilled people who know what to do with all of it.
So when you actually look at who has those 4 Cs in the real world, wow, the gap is just staggering. High-income countries are home to 86% of all AI startups. They get over 90% of all the venture capital funding. The very foundations of this entire revolution are being built and paid for in just a handful of wealthy nations.
But here is a fascinating twist. When you look at who's actually using these tools, like ChatGPT, a huge chunk of them, over 40%, are in middle-income countries. People everywhere are hungry for this technology. They want in. But then you look at the share from the low-income countries, less than 1%. It's barely even on the chart. The poorest people on Earth are almost completely cut off from even using the tools, let alone building them. So you take all of this, the breakneck speed of the tech, the massive disruption to our jobs, this growing global divide, And it all boils down to one fundamental question about the kind of future we really want to build. Where is this road actually taking us? Is it leading to something like a universal basic income for everyone, or are we just building a world with even more inequality?
On one hand, you've got this almost utopian vision. This is from Elon Musk. He calls it universal high income. And the idea is that AI is going to create so much abundance that pretty much anyone can have any product or service they could ever want. A world without scarcity. It sounds pretty incredible, doesn't it?
I mean, it is a fantastic vision, but it immediately crashes into a very simple, very practical question. A world full of stuff is great, but how do we pay for it? If jobs are changing so drastically, where does the money come from? Right now, there's no real plan, no tax system, no distribution model. It's more of a cool thought experiment than an actual policy proposal.
So, while some folks are dreaming about that far-off future, other people are actually on the ground testing practical solutions right here and now. And this is a big deal. The results from the largest ever study on guaranteed income have just been released. So we don't have to guess anymore. This isn't theory, this is real-world data.
So what happened when this study just gave people money every month, no strings attached? Well, the big fear was that everyone would just quit their jobs, right? Didn't happen. The impact on employment was modest. But what it did do was give people, and I absolutely love this phrase, the headspace to dream. It let them get off that paycheck to paycheck hamster wheel. For some, it meant they could take a more flexible job to care for their family. It basically just gave them breathing room. And this quote from the woman who ran the research, Elizabeth Rhodes, I think it just sums it all up perfectly. She says that cash is an imprecise instrument. It's not a magic wand that solves every problem. But what it does do is give people flexibility and agency. It's what they need in that moment to make the best decisions for their own lives.
Which brings us right back to the biggest question of all. This AI revolution isn't a what if, it's here. The immense wealth it's going to create is real. And so the choice that we have to make is simple, but it is not easy. Are we going to use all of this new wealth to build a foundation, a floor for everyone? Or is it all just going to be used to build a higher and higher ceiling for a select few? That is the question that 2025 is forcing all of us to answer.
Wow, that was something, right? But don't go anywhere, there's more coming, and it's going to make you think in a whole new way. Quick reminder, if you like learning cool stuff without the fluff, subscribe now. You won't regret it.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Violent Vault. Today we're diving into something really important. For generations, there was this kind of unspoken promise, work hard your whole life and you'll be able to enjoy a comfortable, secure retirement. But what if I told you that entire promise is starting to crack? A massive global shift is happening right now, and it's threatening the very foundation of what it means to retire. So let's get into it.
I know, this question sounds a little intense, but it's one that millions of people around the globe are starting to ask themselves. This isn't just about spreadsheets and economics. It's deeply personal. It's about the social contract we've all been living under for the better part of a century. And honestly, the stakes couldn't be higher for our future.
And you don't have to look far to see the cracks already forming in the system. Just look at this number. On average, across the world's developed countries, women's pensions are about 25% lower than men's. Now, that's not just a statistic, that's a huge gender pension gap. It's often because of things like career breaks to raise a family or long-standing pay disparities. It just goes to show you the deep inequalities that already exist in a system that's under some serious stress.
So, to really understand why things are so shaky today, we've got to jump in a time machine and look back at how this whole system was built in the first place. The 20th century model was designed for a totally different world, and it was really built on two big ideas of collective security.
Okay, so the first big idea was this thing called the pay-as-you-go system. The easiest way to think about it is like a direct transfer between generations. The taxes you paid for retirement didn't get put into a little savings account with your name on it. Nope, that money went straight out the door to pay for your parents' and grandparents' pensions. The whole system was built on one simple, unspoken bet, that there would always be enough young workers coming up to support the older generation.
And the second pillar of this old system was the defined benefit pension. This was the classic gold watch retirement plan. Your company would literally guarantee you a specific amount of money every single month for the rest of your life. The beauty of this was the certainty. You didn't have to worry about the stock market or about living a really long time. All of that financial risk, it was on your employer, not on you.
Okay, so that old model sounds pretty sweet, right? Well, here's the problem. It was built on a demographic foundation that has completely crumbled. The math that seemed so solid back then just doesn't add up anymore. Two massive global trends have lit the fuse on what we now call a demographic time bomb.
And here's the crazy part. This first trend is actually an incredible success story for humanity. We're living longer, healthier lives than ever before, all thanks to incredible advances in medicine and public health. That's amazing. But from a purely financial point of view, for a pension system, this success creates a huge challenge. Pensions now have to be paid out for 20, 30, even 40 years, way, way longer than the system was ever designed to handle.
And then, happening at the exact same time, you have the other side of the coin. Fertility rates all across the developed world have been dropping. People are having fewer kids, which, down the line, means fewer young people entering the workforce to pay into that system we talked about. You're starting to see the squeeze? And this right here, this is the heart of the crisis. It's just simple, brutal math. You've got a shrinking number of workers paying into the pot, trying to support a ballooning number of retirees who are living longer than ever before. It's like trying to fill a swimming pool with a garden hose while someone else is draining it with a fire hose. Eventually, the pay-as-you-go system just breaks. The money coming in just can't keep up with the money going out.
So this new mathematical reality has forced a massive change, a really fundamental one. Experts call it the Great Risk Shift. The entire philosophy behind retirement is being rewritten right before our eyes. We're moving away from institutions taking care of us and putting that burden squarely onto our own shoulders, onto us as individuals.
And this slide right here, this is everything. This shows you the whole story. On the left, you had the old system, collective risk, guaranteed income. Your company or the government had your back. Now look at the right side. That's our world. Individual risk. Your income isn't guaranteed. It depends entirely on how well your personal investments do. The risk is now almost completely yours. This is that huge shift from defined benefit, the promise, to defined contribution, which is basically your 401k, where the final amount you get is, well, up to you and the market.
And this new reality introduces a brand new kind of anxiety for all of us. It even has a name: longevity risk. It's the terrifying, very real possibility that you could do everything right. You save, you invest your whole life, and you could still run out of money, simply because you lived longer than you planned for. The ultimate blessing of a long life suddenly becomes a massive financial curse.
All right, so faced with this pretty scary new reality, countries all over the world are scrambling to figure this out. Let me tell you, there's no magic bullet here. Instead, we're seeing this huge wave of experiments and some really difficult reforms. So let's take a quick look around the globe at how different places are trying to fix this.
So over in Europe, one of the most common and politically, let's say, explosive solutions is just to raise the official retirement age. It makes sense on paper, right? But as we've seen with massive protests in countries like France, telling people they have to work longer collides head-on with what people expect out of life. But often the demographic math leaves governments with very few other choices.
Now, Latin American countries were actually some of the first to have to deal with this crisis head-on. They pioneered a really big structural change called the multi-pillar model. Don't let the fancy name fool you. The basic idea is just don't put all your retirement eggs in one basket. They're building systems that blend a government safety net with mandatory private savings and your own voluntary savings on top.
At the same time, you've got these massive pension funds, the ones managing literally trillions of our dollars, and they're having to change their game too. To try and meet their huge promises in a world where it's hard to get good returns, they are pouring money into riskier things they call alternative investments. We're talking about things like private companies, infrastructure projects. Basically, they're desperately chasing higher returns for all of us.
So what does all of this mean for you and me? Well, the old, simple retirement contract is gone. It's been torn up. In its place, we have a new, more complex model. And probably the best way to get your head around it is by using this three-pillar framework that a lot of countries are starting to adopt.
Okay, here it is. This is pretty much the new blueprint for retirement security in the 21st century. First, you have Pillar 1. This is a basic government safety net, like Social Security. Its only job is to prevent absolute poverty in old age. Then you have Pillar 2. This is your mandatory savings, like a 401k at work. Its job is to make sure your income doesn't just fall off a cliff when you retire. And finally, Pillar 3. This one's all on you. It's any extra money you save and invest voluntarily to give yourself that extra cushion and security. As you can see, the responsibility is now spread out across all three, which brings us right back to the final
and most critical question. We've shifted from a world of collective guarantees to a world of individual risk. So the old answers just don't work anymore. Is a secure retirement still a right? Or is it now a privilege? Something earned only by those who can successfully navigate all the risks of this new world? I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this one. Let me know in the comments, what's the biggest takeaway for you after watching this? Let's get a conversation going. And hey, if you found this explainer valuable, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.
Thank you for spending time with us here at the Violet Vault. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay focused and keep growing.